Now that you kind of have all those things to consider, we're going to kind of go now into the SEO essentials, breaking down the essential things you really need to know as far as keywords, on-page technical, and kind of all the different things. So I'll hand it back to Olivia to kind of kick us off with discussing keywords and why they matter so much.
Great. Yes. So keywords are sort of the starting point to SEO. Establishing keywords is really the first step to a sound strategy. And they should inform all content production and optimization. So, this is really where things get off the ground. It's important to brainstorm the main keywords or phrases your organization wants to be known for. Um, Not only that, but taking into consideration how your users or audience might already be searching for you. Sometimes those things are the same, but sometimes you might be surprised by the way that users are engaging. So it's important to take your audience into consideration in addition to what's most important to you internally. Um, there are tools such as AdWords. This is a free tool that you can use and can kind of help you judge where you are in relation to your competition and figure out maybe any gaps that you could capitalize on in terms of keywords and choices that you make. Um, Another really vital thing to keep in mind is that we want both short and long tail keywords as part of your overall SEO strategy. And we'll kind of dive into that further right now. Um, so, both short and long tail keywords, like we said, are vital to the SEO strategy. Short tail keywords is sort of like an industry speak for keywords that are more general and typically have a high search volume. So, you'll see in that left hand column things like housing, food bank, online school, right? Very general terms that probably get a high search volume. They typically attract users who are at the top of the sales funnel who are just looking for that general information. Long tail keywords are more precise. So they're sort of the zoomed in version of those short tail keywords. They have typically a lower search volume, which many people then assume means they're not viable, they're not important, they're not worth focusing on. And actually, the opposite is true. Typically, these long tail keywords attract users who are at the bottom of the sales funnel. So they're closer to making a decision or taking an action. And those are the users that you want to attract just as much as people looking for general knowledge. So it's important to devote time to discovering these undervalued keywords. Um, Sometimes they're sort of hidden or they could be emerging. So taking into account, like, how can you anticipate trends in your industry and potentially capitalize on these long tail keywords in the immediate time and build on that momentum. And eventually, those keywords might turn out to be extremely high volume and really competitive. And you've kind of set yourself up for success in that area. So, the ideal ratio for short to long tail keyword is about 1 to 8 in terms of what you're looking for your SEO strategy.
Yeah, and it's very important to pay attention to both. And while it might be really hard to say when a specific short tail, there may be 8 or 10 or however many other long tail words that are very similar that you can win. And sort of the sum of those may equal the value of the one short one. So it's kind of this game of figuring out the value. And when we talk about competition too, we mean many times competition in the search results, right? You may have almost no competitors. And since, we're talking about mostly nonprofits too, um, you know, it's kind of like you don't really compete necessarily, but you do compete for search results. So we
Yeah,
mentioned
that's a
ad.
good
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's a good distinction to make. That when we think about the word competition, oftentimes we're thinking in real time, in real life. And nonprofits don't often compete with each other directly necessarily for the services that you provide. But when we're talking about it within an SEO lens, it's really about how you're ranking for certain keywords. So it might not be another nonprofit that you're competing with, but another business, another organization might be ranking higher than you for things that you want your users to find you for.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, you're also kind of in competition in the SERPs with all sorts of things that may not serve your audience as well as you do. We mentioned AdWords too, and the thing about AdWords is everyone should set up an AdWords account. We highly recommend it, and you don't actually have to run an ad or pay for anything in order to gain access to the tools that AdWords provides. So this is a very common free one. This is Google Ads, their keyword planning tool. They call it the Keyword Planner. So you can use this to discover other synonyms, other keywords, see the competition and search volume on specific keywords. So it's really great for that, and it's totally free. So everyone really should have one set up, even if you don't run ads. And as a nonprofit, also don't forget Google will give you free money to run ads. There's just free money they'll give you as part of the Google AdWords nonprofit program. So definitely, if you don't know about that, look into that. You get free money every month to advertise. So not only can you get the free tool, if you're a nonprofit, you can get some free ads too.
So when we're looking at on page, we've kind of already established how important website content is, but specifically, the question is, how do you optimize that content best? So Nick already alluded to this, but it's worth saying again that your content should be engaging and geared towards your audience. And again, we talked about how all of that content should be informed by the keywords that you've chosen. Um, we want to avoid thin content. And so, like Nick mentioned, the minimum word count for sort of a viable, from an SEO perspective, a viable page would be 400. 800 is better. And 1500's for sort of an actual competitive page. So these are kind of more long form blog posts or something like that. That's where we really get competitive in terms of how that content can stand up to other content surrounding the same subject. In terms of optimizing this content, we talk about something called HTML markup. So once your content is established, it needs to be marked up properly. So you'll hear about metadata, and this has to do with the title tag and headings, the H1 tags that are available. So those two tags in particular are extremely important and allow crawlers and users to make sense of your page. So how is it organized? How is the content sort of flow from one section to another? Alt tags, image alt tags are also extremely important. So every single image on your site should have alt text. And that alt text should describe the image in depth. And that tag, along with any others, should be keyword infused. So you should be able to fit your keyword into that description of the image. Your keyword should show up in your H1 tag, in your title tag, so on and so forth. It's also important, just as a side note, to understand that alt tags for images are important from an accessibility standpoint. We do a lot of work with ADA compliance and kind of helping sites get up to snuff to be sure that they are compliant. And alt tags is one of those things where you can get docked if you don't have the alt text available for people who might be visually impaired. They really rely on that alt text to kind of help them understand and navigate a site. So just another thing to keep in mind there. And then every page should have engaging meta descriptions. So you never want to have a page that's missing meta. That's kind of the sentences that show up below the main title in a search result. So you'll see the link, the blue link where you can actually click on the page, and then a little bit of description or information about what you're going to find. And I don't know about you all, but I really depend on that little snippet of information to inform whether or not I'm going to click there. And so having your keyword, having a really good call to action there, and a really good description of what users will find on any given page is extremely important. So then we kind of get into the site architecture and design. The main thing to keep in mind is that this should just be easy to navigate for a good user experience. You'll see UX, that just means user experience. You might see that on different blog posts that you read surrounding kind of optimal design. But good linking will also help users navigate from page to page, resource to solve their problems. And as you're taking into account how you want to design a site for users, typically, if it's easy for a user to navigate, it'll be easier for a crawler to navigate as well. And so, again, that's just reinforcing the idea that if Google or any other search engine can quickly and efficiently crawl your site, you're going to get better rankings. Therefore, you should get better rankings. Therefore, your organic traffic should increase as well.
And the
So, go
Oh,
ahead, Nick.
I was gonna say, yeah, you may not think of it as SEO, but the design and how your site works is also important because it keeps people on your site. If your site looks well and works well, they may view more pages per visit. So the number of pages per visit people have and the time on page, Google is actually tracking and paying attention to all of that. So if your site works well, people stay on it. That's a benefit to your SEO.
Yeah. And so, one question might be, well, if I put all this time into markup and this and that, how do I know whether what I've done, whether my SEO tactics are, viable or working? And I just wanted to mention, if you have a WordPress site, there's a plugin called Yoast SEO. It's something that I use in my daily work here at Arcstone, and it helps kind of set you up for success because it shows you what you're doing well already on page in terms of SEO and where you can improve. So you can actually, as you type in the SEO title of a page, so what users will see as that blue link, so to speak, in a SERP, you can actually see what that will look like. You'll get a preview of it within this plugin. So you're seeing what users will see, and you can kind of optimize that way, wordsmith, figure out what will be the most impactful way to engage your users. Another thing it allows you to do is to ensure that your title and your meta description don't get cut off, but that they kind of are within that character limit so that the full description, the full title is available and ready for users to see.
Yeah, and I was gonna say there's so much stuff to keep track of with on page. A tool that scans your page and points everything out you may be missing is kind of nice. We
Yeah.
had a question too. Can you give an example of what Olivia described? I think that question may be about the code, about the HTML markup, which we have sort of a short example here I'm showing, which is Blue Sky School. So it's showing so their page title and then their H1 here. This shows the code of their site and it shows that this H1. So the title has free online school. The H1 has free online education, and then the H2s are customized supportive heritage. So you see they're creating a hierarchy with their title and their H1 and then their H2 and then there's H3s on the page. So when we say the markup or the HTML, there are these special tags like heading tags, paragraph lists, title tag, alt tag. And when those are all used correctly, Google then understands the structure of your content. They understand that the words you put in H1 are more important than H3 because we have this hierarchy here that's established.
And that's why using keywords in your headings is so important, because users and also search engines will see, they'll pick up on, oh, this is an H1 tag with X keyword. That means the rest of this page should deal with or also include that keyword, content related to it. And the more you have that keyword show up or other relevant keywords or key phrases, the more viable that page will be to Google and to users to answer that question or solve that problem that they're having. And then you will in turn show up more in search results for that keyword.
So here's a short worksheet too. And we're not going to really go to it in depth, but it'll be emailed to you. So the follow-up email to this webinar, which will go out early next week, has all kinds of more useful tools. And so because there's so much on page to think about, we created this short cheat sheet worksheet, where you can do your title and it has the 70 characters max to remind you in here, page description, the targeted keywords, targeted personas, all of this kind of stuff. So this will be in that follow-up email, actually a whole workbook of different worksheets to kind of help you plan out your SEO because there is a lot to keep in mind. So
I think those will be extremely useful to kind of work through step by step on the page. What are the things you don't want to miss, and how do you want to organize your content in a way that's most optimized? So we're hoping that'll be useful to you. So now we're going to dive into technical SEO and kind of talk about the components that go along with that. So, um, indexability is really just how many of your pages in your site show up or are indexed within SERPs, which within those search results for any given search engine. So it goes hand in hand with errors and load times. So the reason your site needs to function well is because Google actually has a quota of how much time it can spend or will spend crawling any given site. And so once they've met that, they move on. And however many pages that crawler has gotten through in that amount of time, that's what's indexed, and they move on to the next. So having your site function properly, having it extremely fast, quick for users and also crawlers to get through, and as minimal errors as possible. We'll kind of get into what some of those errors might be, but things like if your code isn't optimized properly, if there's a bunch of extra space, it just takes longer for a crawler to get through that. Therefore, less of your pages might be indexed in the long run. So that's something that's really important. Nick also mentioned something that goes into SEO is the server that you're using. Or who's hosting, those kinds of things. So that can make a difference for your load time, and again in turn affect your SEO. So it's just something to keep in mind. Are you aware of what server you're using? Is there a way to potentially move to something that might garner you a little bit more speed? Something else to keep in mind is mobile performance. So Google actually does mobile first indexing now. So even though you might feel like users don't use your mobile site, or you don't feel like people find you that way, Google is crawling sites, the mobile site first, because most users in general are using mobile devices now. So it's extremely important to have your mobile site optimized as well.
Yeah, and here's
So
just a screenshot. Oh, sorry, I was going to say, here's a screenshot too of one of these tools. This is a free Google tool called Page Speed Insights, which will give you a mobile and desktop breakdown of how your site performs. So this is a Masonic charity site. This is their scholarship page, which has a 96 out of 100. The score is 0 to 100. So very well optimized, and obviously a very important page for them. Their primary function, one of them of their nonprofits, is scholarship. So
And if you see in the details there, as you kind of scroll, it might be in this screenshot, but then also as you scroll down on Google Page Speed Insights, it'll give you ideas for how you can improve. So things like optimizing your images and other uploaded file sizes. Again, like we talked about, minimizing the amount of sort of space that your code takes up, having your sitemap up to date and submitted to Google Search Console, which we'll get into a little bit more in depth. All of these things kind of work in tandem to optimize your site properly from a technical standpoint, and they're all important to search engines' ability to index you properly.
here's another screenshot too, and this is a couple different sections of Search Console, which is a tool we'll talk about more later. This is free from Google. It's called Google Search Console. This will show you things like errors. So this is a client we were working with who had some errors on their site. Excuse me. And we're using techniques to minimize those errors. So you see the errors are going down, down to basically, almost nothing. And then also shows your numbers of valid pages, 14,000. And so this is a large website. And then the other little box is showing sort of your search engine result page performance. So how many impressions, meaning how many times in searches during this time period is your site showing up, and then the clicks. So you can get that click through rate there. So you'll see that also climbing and climbing from, less than, probably around 100 or something up to, thousands as we improve that site's SEO. So we'll talk a little bit now about OffPage. OffPage is sort of all the stuff not happening on your site that you control. So this is mostly about links and what we call link building or what we call backlinks. So what you want is you don't just want any link to your site. There's some things you want to look for links, right? You want to look for links coming from reputable sites or from what we say good domain authority. So domain authority is a metric. It's a measurement from 0 to 100. This is a number that Google gives your site, which just is sort of a combination of all sorts of intelligence Google knows about your site. And the higher that domain authority number, the more Google is going to tend to show you in search results. So typical sites maybe in the 20s to 40s. A site like CNN or some major reputable news site might be in the 80s. Um, so another thing about links is there's two kinds of links. There's what's called no follow links and follow links. So, if you're on YouTube or some social media website, you link to something that is going to be a no follow link typically, meaning that the no follow is a little piece of code that's added to a link that tells Google, yeah, I'm linking to this website, but I'm not vouching for them, right? So Google sees a link from one site to another site as that first site kind of vouching for the other one, saying, hey, I deal with this type of subject matter. I'm linking out to them because they deal with it as well. I'm kind of vouching for it. Um, so if possible, you want follow links and the anchor text, which means the text inside of the link, what actually makes up the link when they click on it. That text matters too. Google reads that, so they will try to interpret, what that link means based on that text. So places to get links are from social media and content and other platforms. And although they may not be follow, they will help people find you. Guest blog posts, forums, other directories, places like that. Those links can tend to be follow and can be very valuable. So say you run a food bank. Probably your state or county has all these other sites that list food banks and stuff. You want to be in all of those other places where people are listing resources for food or something. You'd want to be in those and have a link from those sites to your site. So that's what we call link building. And then it's important if you find links that are bad, which you can, if you have a very large, well-established website, there's kind of just odd, weird links out there on really crummy, spammy websites. And you can what they call disavow those links. You can tell Google, I know they're linking to me, but we don't want to be associated with them. So you want to disavow those kind of bad links. Um, so I see it looks like some people are asking questions in the chat. Make sure if you can, please make sure to put the questions in the Q&A so I'll see them. We did have one about how do you know your domain authority? That was a question. Oh, and which is perfect segue into this tool. So here's a tool from Moz. There's many other tools you can find out there if you just Google domain authority lookup or something like that. So you can see I just punched in CNN and Moz is saying the domain authority is 95, which of course is very high. It only goes up to 100. And right there they have linking root domains 1.2 million. That means there are 1.2 million other unique websites that link to CNN.com. So the number of root linking domains is important. If you have links from 20 websites coming to you versus 2,000, that's telling Google very different things about your site, right? And that your website's popularity. I talked about toxic links, what we call bad backlinks or spammy links. So this is a tool which we'll talk a little bit about later. This is a paid SEO tool, which is giving you a breakdown of your links. It's saying, okay, your toxicity level is low. You have roughly 8 links that are definitely garbage, spammy links. You have, about 12 that are suspect and 370 good ones. So this is a good tool to sort of judge the links coming to you. Another related thing to the linking and backlinks is what we call local SEO. So local SEO is typically about links coming back to your site too, but there's some unique things to keep in mind with local SEO. And and many people don't realize this, but the actual search engines are highly localized too. Even if you're not searching for something like grocery stores near me or something like that, Like any search result done, in Wisconsin is going to be very different than in New York or Florida or Texas. So search engines are highly localized. Google literally has hundreds of versions of the search engine for different locales. But local SEO, some things that help that if you want to be found locally, if you provide a local service, is having your full contact information, phone number, address, email, everything on every single page and using it consistently everywhere. So even down to the phone number, if your phone number in your business profile somewhere on the internet is, uses dashes and it uses some parentheses or dots on your website, that seems like a stupid trivial thing, but you want to use incredibly consistent contact information, how you write it out. That helps Google kind of get a picture of where your business is everywhere on the internet and kind of bring that together. You want to claim your business profiles for sure, at least in Google My Business. You want to claim your profile, but claim your Glassdoor profile, claim your Yelp profile. I mean, claim every business profile in every system out there that you may be in. And then you want to do what's called get citations. Citations basically just mean a mention of your business in some other directory. Maybe it's a directory of food banks, or it's a directory of local nonprofits, or it's, in Yelp, which is sort of a directory of businesses and reviews. You want to make sure you keep track of all of those and manage that content in those other places and get local listings and get reviews if that's applicable to what you do, getting reviews. So all of that stuff is important. As you can see, I'm using Blue Sky as another example. You see in their footer here on every single page on their website is their full contact information, and the phone number is always written this way with parentheses. And they don't abbreviate sweet, it's always spelled out sweet. So I do this consistently, and you can see all that matches their map profile too in Google. So that's kind of the basics sort of the localized SEO things you want to think about. And we're going to talk about more about the search result appearance now. So when we mean appearance, we're talking about how you appear in the search results. And so Olivia mentioned a little bit about that. We already talked about the best practices for that metadata. Metadata meaning the title and description tag. And Olivia described it pretty well before. One thing to keep in mind, though, not many people realize this, is it's not a guarantee that Google is going to use your description. If it's really good and they feel like it makes sense, they will. But they could just choose some random chunk of text from your website. So that's why following those best practices is super important. And using a sitemap file, we mentioned Google Search Console is where you submit that sitemap file. That basically is a file that's code, and it lists every page. And you can use that file to tell Google what page is most important, because there's an attribute to rank the page from 1 to 5 for importance. So that will determine in the search engine results if they show other links to your site, not just the main link for that result, but sort of the other ones. That's how you control that. And then we talked about schema a little bit. Schema is extra code that users don't see. That's just for Google, and that helps with special data, like things like events, which have dates and times, things like job listings, things like product or service listings. So just a very easy to understand example is if you've ever searched for a TV, Googled for, widescreen TV, and you see Google pulls up a thing on the side where you can sliders for like screen size and all these other attributes. That's all driven by that special schema data. And then we talk about targeting snippets. I showed you that Blue Sky featured snippet. So finding where Google is pulling out those snippets for any given search topic or keywords, and targeting to take those over to make sure you show up, because that is even better. It's good to show up as number one for some kind of search, but even better than number one is that Google just pulls a featured snippet from your website. This is just a little bit more data. And we're getting short on time, so we'll have to go through this fairly quickly, but a little bit more data on what we mean about those meta tags. That's that title tag, description tag. Again, the users don't see those when they're on your site, but those are part of the search results. So title 50 to 60 characters. That will ensure most people won't see it cut off. They'll see the whole thing. And then description 140 to 160. If you follow these best practices right here, that will help you control how you show up, and hopefully Google will pick your description. And there is another tag too, which I'll just briefly mention: keywords, which is not used at all by search engines anymore. But some third-party tools may use it, or you may have internal uses for that. But as far as actual search engine results, you don't even need to worry about that. It's not used by search engines. And just another little thing to kind of get talk to you about this, the schema, or the rich results we talked about, which is something users don't see at all right when they're on your site. It's behind the scenes code. But here's just a tool. It's the rich results testing tool, another free Google tool you could use. So if your site takes advantage of the schema, say you have events, calendar of events, job postings, whatever, you can point this tool at your site and it will pull it up. So this is, a job posting by Masonic Charities, and you can see it saying, yes, this page has rich results enabled, and it shows you the little, content it's pulling out. So